Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 700 Club. We've got a busy news day for you, and I want to go over a few things because you hear all this stuff in the paper. Let me explain what may be happening that I think is important. Of course, the major news is that Donald Trump did what he was perfectly capable of doing. He asked for the resignation of one of his members of his cabinet. A president certainly does that after an election. It happens all the time, no problem. Of course, the Democrats are making out to be some nefarious conspiracy, but he asked Jeff Sessions to resign. Now, what did he do? What did Sessions do that was wrong? Well, he recused himself. He had had a minor discussion with some Russian at some cocktail party, and it was absolutely nothing. But he recused himself from all of the activity of his office, and in the process left the president totally naked, because he was the man who was supposed to do the blocking and tackling for the guy carrying the ball, and he didn't do it. It's like the lineman in a major football game suddenly quit and leave the quarterback to defend for himself. They just don't do that, but he did it. He did it, and he felt so righteous that I've recused myself. Well, it ruined him. So what comes in, Rosenstein, his deputy, then does what nobody in his right mind would have done. He calls for a special counsel to go and investigate his boss, the president. I mean, it was shocking. It shouldn't have happened. And now we've got a situation where the Democrats are saying, well, we're going to get to the bottom of all this. Well, nonsense. Jenna Browder has a story about this, and we'll talk about the successor and what should happen, okay?
President Trump made his frustration with Jeff Sessions no secret, and yesterday, just one day after the midterm elections, took action asking for Sessions' resignation. Sessions departed the Justice Department in an emotional farewell.
I know, Jenna, you and I have been with the president where he has privately talked about Jeff Sessions and been very frustrated. I mean, he's publicly talked about it, but he's also privately been very frustrated with the fact that he recused himself. So this has been in the hopper for a while.
His replacement and former Chief of Staff Matthew Whitaker will now oversee the Russia investigation. That's raising concerns because of Whitaker's criticisms of the probe headed by Robert Mueller.
I could see a scenario where Jeff Sessions is replaced with a recess appointment, and that Attorney General doesn't fire Bob Mueller, but he just reduces his budget so low that his investigation grinds to almost a halt.
Nancy Pelosi, who's aiming to be the next speaker in the new Democrat-controlled House, tweeted, "It is impossible to read Attorney General Sessions' firing as anything other than another blatant attempt by real Donald Trump to undermine and end Special Counsel Mueller's investigation." Others are already promising investigations. In a press conference Wednesday, President Trump vowed to work with House Democrats and spoke well of Pelosi.
You know, she loves this country, and she's a very smart woman. She's done a very good job.
But he warned that investigations can work both ways.
They can play that game, but we can play it better, because we have a thing called the United States Senate, and all you're going to do is end up in back and forth and back and forth, and 2 years is going to go up, and we won't have done a thing.
And there could be many investigations into the president when Democrats take control of the House this winter. They've already talked about issuing a subpoena for President Trump's tax returns. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
I want to go with you now about what is going on with this probe. When you have a special counsel, the mandate for such a person must be to investigate a specific crime, not to go on a fishing expedition around the country. It's a specific crime in a specific jurisdiction under a specific set of laws. Now, that man, Mueller, has not followed that. He has gone after various people in the Republican Party. He's gone for bank fraud. He's gone for tax fraud. He's gone all this stuff. Has nothing to do with a Russian involvement in our election. Okay, he's been at it now for a long time, spent a lot of money. Now, what is coming up next? As I understand it, there are going to be several carefully vetted interrogatories in writing given to the president and the president will answer those interrogatories, period. And it's time now for Mr. Mueller to issue a report of his findings. And what he's going to say is, I didn't find any Russian collusion anywhere. Now, that's what he's going to say. And when that's over, he should leave. And that should happen probably by Thanksgiving, certainly no later than Christmas. So his work is over. And in the process, though, he no longer will be reporting to Rosenstein, the deputy, because his boss now will be this Whitaker, the acting attorney general. But we haven't yet seen the authorizing documents that outline the scope of the activities of the special prosecutor. He did it, and he's expanded it, and he's amplified it, and never once has he given Congress or anybody else a look at what he said. Now, the Republicans in the House wanted to get him to come and testify. He has steadfastly refused to do it. He said, I'm not going to do it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to come after you. Well, that's what he said. And then in a joke, he said, I'm going to tape the president, and then I'm going to see if I can invoke the 25th Amendment and get him disqualified. I mean, this is what he said. Now, he says, well, I was only kidding. Well, was he kidding or was he not kidding? I mean, it's a pretty serious thing. And in my opinion, he needs to go, but I think the president doesn't want to ask for his resignation until after the Mueller thing is over. But the Mueller thing must wind down before Thanksgiving or before Christmas. They can't go any longer. He's done everything he can do, and there's been no evidence of any collusion with any Russian anywhere. Okay. Now, the new acting attorney general, Matt Whitaker, has joined the Justice Department last year. President Bush appointed him U.S. Attorney for Iowa's Southern District in 2004. Whitaker has questioned, as I have, the scope of Robert Mueller's investigation. He did it 2 years ago. In a CNN op-ed, he wrote that it would be a, quote, violation for Robert Mueller to investigate President Trump's finances. He added it would be dangerously close to crossing a red line. Now, in his college years, Whitaker played tight end for the University of Iowa and caught a pass in the 1991 Rose Bowl. Okay. So that's the man that's come in as Attorney General acting. And it seems like to me, if the president wants to get somebody, there's a congressman named Trey Gowdy who is unbelievably intelligent and knowledgeable about these things, and he might well, if they don't want Whitaker, they could go with Gowdy, and he'd be a tremendous attorney general.
What a mess.
What a mess. But this thing has been a fishing expedition, and now you see these Democrats are screaming, well, you've got to allow the scope of the investigation. He's investigated everything known to man, and then he's brought indictments against various people for bank fraud and financial crimes.
That had nothing to do with
nothing to do with Russia whatsoever. And Whitaker has said, look, if we don't fire him, we can starve him out. And I think that's a good thing, too. You can cut his budget. Yeah. But Rosenstein apparently has given him an unlimited budget and an unlimited scope. But he's never shown the papers to anybody. And, how do you know? It's all been done in secret. And apparently, behind the scenes, there was some collusion between Mueller and the former head of the FBI and various others in the Justice Department. They were all buddies. They all worked together.
And, people are so critical of the things that the president tweets, and I think everybody'd like him to tweet in a little more civil manner. Yeah. But can you imagine what it's like to feel that kind of divisiveness, that kind of pressure, that kind of accusation every day when you're trying to get the job done?
Awful.
I mean,
and you read the New York Times, the Washington Post, they are just 100% against him. And I might add something else. There was a CNN reporter who misbehaved terribly in a press conference, refused to give the microphone to the young lady who was working for the White House to give the phone so others could have. And he's just had his press credentials revoked.
Well, it's time that people, yes, action needs to be taken when people are inappropriate.
Well, he was inappropriate, and he can't get into the White House anymore, and good for them. Whew. Okay, does that clarify anything?
That clarifies it.
All right, here we go. Anyhow, look for the Mueller thing to be wound up no later than Christmas. All right. Well, another mass shooting in America, this time in California. John Jessup has more of that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
Pat, this latest shooting happened at a crowded bar about an hour from Los Angeles when a masked man walked in armed with a handgun and smoke grenades. Police say many lives were lost. Mark Martin reports.
Authorities say those who were shot and killed included people inside the bar and a police officer. The gunman was later found dead at the scene.
I was to the front door. I was talking to my stepdad, and I just started hearing these big pops, pop, pop, pop. There was probably 3 or 4. I hit the ground.
Customers at the Borderline Bar were there for its college country night. The popular spot in Thousand Oaks is about 45 minutes from Los Angeles.
Upon going through the front door, the sheriff's sergeant was struck multiple times with gunfire, and there were multiple other victims of different levels of injury inside that were rescued from the scene and taken to local hospitals.
Witnesses said the scene was chaotic.
I saw him point to the back of the cash register, and he just kept firing. I ran out the front door. I hear chairs being thrown out the window. People were trying to get out the window, and the gunman went behind the cash register. There was probably 12 shots before I got out the front door.
People scrambled for safety, fleeing in panic.
As our first deputies arrived on scene, they also heard shots.
This man helped pull people to safety.
And he basically was unloading, and all I did was grab as many people as I could and pull them underneath the table, and then till I heard the shots, till I heard a break in the shots, and then we got people out of there as much as we could.
Police say the only weapon found was a handgun. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Thanks, Mark. Pat?
You know, I really believe that a lot of these crazy gunmen are on some kind of medication. I don't know whether it's some kind of tranquilizer or something like that that causes some of this violence. But I can't believe that with that many crazy people in America. You think there are?
I can believe that, yeah.
So much for that. But no, seriously, I do believe some of these mass killings, the people have been mentally unhinged, but many of them are under psychiatric care and they're taking some kind of psychotropic type of medication. And I think it has an effect.
Well, and many of them are unhinged and not under psychiatric care. And how do you keep guns out of the hands of people like that? Well, it's very challenging.
Who knows? John, let's talk about politics. What you got?
Well, Pat, turning to the recent elections, the Republican advantage in the Senate is still unclear. Races in Arizona and Florida are too close to call. In Arizona, Republican Martha McSally has a 1% lead over Democrat Kyrsten Sinema. And in Florida, Democrat Bill Nelson is calling for a recount after Governor Rick Scott's lead shrunk to less than 0.5%. Well, the results of the 2018 midterms shifted the balance of power right here in Washington, D.C., but as Chris Mitchell reports, they also affected capitals around the world, including Jerusalem.
While Republicans maintained control of the Senate, they lost the House.
There's a lot of power in the House. I mean, there's a lot of influence over appropriations. And so it's not going to be, it's not going to be as easy for them as it has been. It's going to be a battle. I hope to God that Israel doesn't have to pay for it, because that would be a terrible mistake.
The next item on the agenda will likely be the president's peace plan.
The president has been pushing what he calls the deal of the century, an Israeli-Palestinian peace accord. And my assumption is that he will be pressing his peace plan more rigorously in the future. My own advice as a member of the Israeli government is that we study very seriously and take seriously this peace plan and try to respond to it as flexibly and openly as possible.
Palestinians see an opportunity.
The Democrats in the United States are getting closer to a position that may lead eventually to a peace process in the area, whereas his policy has really been a very difficult one to understand. It does not get us anywhere closer to a peace process. On the contrary, I think it makes it very difficult to reach a peace process. From that position, I think the result of the elections indicate a possibility of a change in American policy eventually.
Mike Evans serves on President Trump's Faith Advisory Board and is troubled by the recent history of Democrats with Israel's prime minister. Evans says the midterms pose a challenge to both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
There's never been a partnership with this great. There's never been an opportunity this great in the whole Middle East as there is right now. And the midterm elections is a very, very difficult dilemma for both of them to face right now.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Well, this just in, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been hospitalized. She fractured 3 ribs in a fall at her office. The 85-year-old Ginsburg is at George Washington University Hospital for observation and treatment. And Pat, this comes as the court just started its latest session last month.
Well, she's a brilliant woman, and I won't take anything from her. And I think everybody should pray for her that she'll be healed. But it does seem like she is a little bit over the hill and the time to say goodbye. And if this is the case, and it may happen, this will give President Trump another opening in the Supreme Court with a Senate that is much more favorable than the one that heard for Brett Kavanaugh. So the next hearing, he'll have 2 or 3 more Republican senators, so it'll be interesting. But I would just say pray for her. She's a very brilliant lady, sleeps a lot. It looks like
very fragile.
Very, very fragile woman. And all we can say is pray for her. She's a very fine lady, and she was, I think, confirmed with almost 99 votes. I mean, it was unbelievable when she'd been a member of the ACLU, but it didn't matter.